Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a new kind of AI, one that learns from the world's continuous rhythms, like a human heartbeat or the swings of a financial market, instead of just looking at static pictures. It's a really fundamental shift in how machines can actually perceive the world around us.
So, let's just start with a huge challenge facing AI today. Our world is full of waves and rhythms and all sorts of continuous signals, right? Like this ECG signal you see here. But how on earth do you get a computer, which really just thinks in ones and zeros, to understand the incredibly rich, complex story that's inside a signal like this?
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to see why today's AI kind of hits a wall. Then, we'll uncover the data's hidden structure. After that, we'll get into a new tool called HVNs, taking it all the way from the big idea to how it's coded, how it was tested, and finally, what it all means for the future.
All right, first things first, let's really dig into the problem that needed solving. Why exactly are our current tools struggling so much with this kind of data? You see, the main issue is that most machine learning models are built for what's called finite data. Just think of neat, clean rows in a spreadsheet. But the real world? It's messy. It's full of what researchers call infinite dimensional data, which is a fancy way of saying signals that are so complex you can't just neatly bottle them up in a fixed number of columns. Think about audio waves or stock market data. Our tools are basically trying to jam a square peg into a round hole.
And even our classic go-to methods like principal component analysis, or PCA, they start to get really shaky. PCA is supposed to find the most important patterns in data, but when you don't have a ton of samples or the signal is just super complex, the patterns it finds can be, totally misleading or just unstable. What it learns from one data sample might not work at all on the next one, and that makes it pretty unreliable.
So this problem led the researchers to a really brilliant idea. They thought, what if, instead of forcing our own structure onto the data, we could just let the data show us its own hidden structure?
And the key to this whole thing is something called the covariance operator. Now, don't worry about the complicated name. Just think of it as a relationship map. It's not just looking at single data points. No, it's meticulously charting how every single part of a signal moves and changes in relation to every other part. It basically captures the entire symphony of connections that's humming away deep inside the data itself.
And this is where the magic really happens. The researchers figured out they could use this covariance blueprint to create a totally unique frequency domain for any signal. Now, in simple terms, they found a way to look at the signal in a new mathematical space, a Hilbert space, where its most fundamental patterns just pop out and become crystal clear. They call this the Hilbert Covariance Fourier Transform, or HVFT. It's kind of like giving the AI a brand new pair of glasses that lets it see the signal's true identity.
So, we've got the theory. Let's move on to the solution and see how all this gets built into a seriously powerful new kind of neural network.
So this new method is called a Hilbert Covariance Network, or HVN, and here's how it works, in basically 3 steps. First, it uses that covariance operator we talked about to define the signal's own special frequency domain. Then, using that domain as a guide, it learns how to design custom filters that crank the volume on the important patterns and tune out all the background noise. And finally, by stacking these filters up in layers, it creates a deep network that learns directly from the signal's own internal wiring. It's brilliant.
Now, this is a beautiful theory for these infinite, continuous signals, but, our computers only work with finite numbers. So how do you actually build this thing and get it to run on a real computer?
Well, the researchers developed a really smart, principled process. You start with the real-world signal, and you just take a bunch of samples. From those samples, you can compute a practical version of the covariance operator. Then, and this is the really clever part, they use something called the discretization technique, which is just a fancy way of translating that flowing signal into a grid of numbers a computer can actually work with. And just like that, you have a practical HVN, all ready to start learning.
Okay, now for the fun part. The big question. Does this new approach actually work any better than what we were using before?
So the team set up a head-to-head showdown. They put their new HVN model up against a standard multi-layer perceptron, or MLP. That's a model that only looks at individual data points, and a classifier that uses that traditional PCA method we mentioned earlier. So for the first test, they used synthetic data, and they deliberately hid the answer in the covariance, in the relationships between the features. While the standard MLP, which only sees the individual features, totally struggled. The PCA method was basically just guessing, but the HVN model? Oh man, its accuracy just skyrocketed as it got more data, proving that it could actually tap into that hidden relational structure.
And this is where it gets really impressive, because this shows just how stable the HVN is. For the next test, they just flooded the signals with noise. And again, the other models completely fell apart. But the HVN, it consistently sliced right through all that static and found the correct pattern. It's incredibly robust.
And finally, the ultimate test, the real world. They used it to classify different types of human heartbeats from a big data set. And what do you know? The HVN came out on top again, hitting about 91% accuracy. That's a huge jump over both the PCA-based model and the standard MLP.
So this little table really sums it all up. A standard MLP, it only sees the surface-level, first-order features, and it tends to overfit. PCA can see a little deeper into second-order variants, but it's just not stable. The HVN, though, it learns directly from that rich second-order covariance structure, and that's what makes it so powerful, and maybe more importantly, so robust and transferable.
Okay, so why does any of this matter outside of a research lab? What can we actually do with this brand new capability? Well, the possibilities are pretty massive. This whole framework could unlock new discoveries in neuroscience by analyzing really complex EEG scans. It could help us find those hidden correlations in chaotic financial markets. And, like we just saw, it can improve medical diagnostics. It even opens up new doors in the totally mind-bending field of quantum machine learning.
And we'll just leave you with that thought. This work, it's not just another algorithm. It's like a whole new lens for our machines to view the world through. And it really makes you wonder, right? What other profound, complex patterns are hiding all around us, in plain sight, just waiting for the right tool to come along and finally reveal them?